Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. It's so wonderful to be with you and to gather with you virtually. I know some of you are in person. I'm so glad we can do this hybrid event with you. My name is Bethany Davis Knoll. I'm the Executive Director of the State Energy and Environmental Impact Center at NYU. The center is a nonpartisan academic center dedicated to the support of state AG work on environmental, climate, clean energy, and environmental justice. We're so grateful to our co-sponsors for today's event: Michigan State University College of Law Career Services Office, University of Detroit Mercy School of Law Career Services Office, University of Michigan Law School Office of Career Planning, and the Wayne State University Law School Office of Career and Professional Development. Now, I'm just going to give a brief roadmap and then we'll get to the main event. We're going to start with opening remarks by AG Dana Nessel, who will then take a question from one of our students. Next, my colleague Jessica Bell, the center's deputy director, will give some opening remarks about today's panel. You can see a link in the chat for the complete bios for all of today's speakers. Since we have a lot to do and we have a lot, they're going to have a lot to share, we didn't want to spend time reading those out, but you should read them at your leisure. At the end, we'll have time for questions, and we look forward to a conversation with you all. So, but in the meantime, if you'd like to ask a question, put it in the Q&A so we can get that organized. Okay, now I'm so honored to introduce AG Dana Nessel. She's a graduate of Michigan and Wayne State Law School. She's a stalwart champion of Michigan's environmental and public health. She's a former criminal prosecutor and civil rights attorney. Her Environmental Protection Division is actively fighting to ensure clean air, water, and energy for Michigan's residents, so that our most valuable assets are preserved for generations to come. She has also joined the battle to combat the largest public health crisis in the nation, prescription drug addiction, and to stem the tide of Michigan's biggest environmental crisis in decades, PFAS contamination. As the state's chief law enforcement officer, AG Dana Nessel's work has continued to the department's criminal investigations into the Flint water crisis and sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. She has created a conviction integrity unit to investigate claims of innocence so that even when we prosecute the state's most heinous crimes, we can ensure the public's trust in our criminal justice system. I'm so glad that we can introduce her to you and hear from her today. AG Nessel, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for putting this together. Thank you for having me as a part of it. I'll just start off with a story. When I entered college, like 972 years ago at the University of Michigan, I started off at the Dana School of Natural Resources, which is not technically named after me, but don't tell people that. I wanted to be an environmental lawyer. That was my dream. That was my goal. And I was very excited about it until I learned about this class that you had to pass called organic chemistry. And then I was like, you know what? Liberal arts, that might be a better way for me to go. So even though I did not become an environmental lawyer and I have not practiced in that field as a line attorney, I have dedicated myself to caring deeply about these subjects and hiring the very best and smartest environmental lawyers I can find who presumably could pass organic chemistry. So with that being said, you know, I think all of us at some time or another, you know, we've when we're talking about Michigan, we've done this thing when we're describing wherever it is that we're located. And you know what Michigan is known for is what surrounds all the rest of that, which of course are the Great Lakes of the state of Michigan. 21% of the Earth's fresh surface water surrounds all of us in this state. So the attorneys in my department in the Environmental, Natural Resources, and Agriculture Division of the Department of Attorney General, what they do day in and day out is they work to safeguard not only our water, and again, I mean, I feel like it's incumbent upon me as the AG of Michigan to play a much bigger role in this than maybe even in other states, because of the fact that we have so much of the Great Lakes that falls within our jurisdiction, but also not just our water, to safeguard Michigan's soil and our land and our air. The federal and state statutes that make up environmental law are as important as the air we breathe and the water that we drink. And the dedicated attorneys at my department enforce those laws to the benefit of all Michiganders, and I would argue really to all Americans. And they do this by enforcing a network of statutes and regulations to strike a balance between ensuring access to resources relied upon by industry for economic growth and protecting the safety of those resources to ensure the health and well-being of our state and all of our 10 million plus residents. But left unchecked and unregulated, we know that there are entities that have, will, and do exploit our natural assets for their own gain. You know, one of the most high profile cases that our department has handled since I've been in the office is the ongoing legal battle to shut down Enbridge Line 5. You know, at the beginning of her term, Governor Whitmer revoked and terminated the 1953 easement that permits Enbridge to operate its pipeline. And I filed suit immediately in state court to enforce that decision. These two aging pipelines are in the midst of a busy shipping channel at the bottom of the Straits of Mackinac. This line has spilled 33 times since 1968, dumping at least 1.1 million gallons of oil into our precious water. And Enbridge has since used a series of legal maneuvers to try to thwart the enforcement of this shutdown. And we know that the operation of Line 5 represents a grave and unreasonable risk to the state's residents and our natural resources. And shutting down the pipeline is the only way to guarantee that we avoid an environmental catastrophe in the Straits of Mackinac. And likely, if this occurs, could be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, oil spill in American history that we've had near misses on more times than I can count, just since I've been in office. So we intend to use every legal argument available to help us shut down the pipeline. So let me say this, as an assistant attorney general in my department, you would find yourself working on a variety of different types of cases and on laws regarding air quality, chemical safety, waste management, water quality, contamination cleanup, resource sustainability. And if you were part of the Department of Attorney General's ENRA division, you know, you might be, for instance, assigned to work on a lawsuit that I filed against the Arbor Hills landfill for violating our state standards to prevent contaminated rainwater from seeping into the groundwater. Or you could be a part of the team handling Michigan's gigantic PFAS lawsuit, which is a very novel suit that not many states have been involved in. Over the past few years, we've all learned about the very harmful and lasting impacts of PFAS, otherwise known as forever chemicals that build up in our environment and are found in thousands of industrial and consumer products. So my department filed suit against 17 defendants that knowingly designed, marketed, developed, distributed, sold, manufactured, released, supplied, transported, handled, and arranged for the disposal in treatment of PFAS or PFAS-contained products in Michigan in such a way that it caused harm to our state's natural resources and to all of our residents. The one thing that we probably all have in common right now, everyone who's attending this, we all have PFAS in our body as we speak, as a result of the work of these defendants who knowingly allowed their products to be disseminated all around the state of Michigan, all around the country, all around the globe, knowing the kind of harm that they would do to all of us. So this work is groundbreaking. It is critical to the health of the people of our state and many other states as well. So as an attorney focused on energy law, should you choose to take on a position like this, you would be an advocate for your fellow residents and neighbors for access to affordable, safe, reliable, and efficient energy. And as you might know, Michigan has experienced a significant amount of power outages that have impacted more than 1 million customers all across our state. And no one can deny the relationship between climate change and extreme weather. And we've all witnessed the increasing impact of climate change on weather patterns. And utility providers have been slow and reluctant to improve infrastructure to the level necessary to ensure service and the safety of customers, resulting in increased frequent power outages and interruptions. So I have called on Michigan's largest utilities, Consumers Energy and DTE, to do more for their customers. And that includes things like providing voluntary credits to consumers affected by the outages rather than requiring an application for it. Providing greater credits to assist customers who have lost hundreds of dollars more in food or alternative housing costs. And I've also called on these same utilities to create a fund to assist displaced customers during significant power outages. And last year I filed a notice of intervention in Consumer Energy's request to substantially hike up electricity rates. And this came after the Michigan Public Service Commission approved the rate increase. My office also intervened when DTE wanted a $195 million rate increase, which would have increased consumer energy costs by over 11%. And the settlement my office secured in that case actually saved consumers in the state over $94 million, just that one case. So we've saved Michigan Energy customers over $1 billion just since I took office in 2019 by my attorneys intervening in rate increases in front of the Michigan Public Service Commission. So that is also part of the work that we do with the department. And, you know, I put the power of the department behind signing onto as many efforts as possible with myself and AGs from many other states in order to prioritize addressing climate change. That is a huge part of the work that we do at our department. So in September, for instance, of 2021, Michigan joined a coalition of 19 other attorneys general in urging Congress to respond to the climate crisis and advance environmental justice by funding critical programs in budget reconciliation legislation. And in a letter to Democratic congressional leaders, the coalition called on Congress to pass infrastructure legislation and to allocate funding in the upcoming reconciliation bill that addresses the rapid transition to a clean energy economy, climate change, and the environmental injustices faced by low-income communities of color and tribal and indigenous communities. And we have numerous cases in the office right now that involve so many of these different topics, and the opportunity really to fight for those who have never had a voice in terms of environmental justice issues, and who've really gotten the, frankly gotten the shaft when it comes to all kinds of different issues, merely because they were low income, merely because they were people of color, and they didn't have the type of resources to fight for the health of themselves and their children because of various different environmental concerns in their areas. So if you were to participate in this kind of work, you would do so knowing that you'd be working to protect the people of Michigan and its landscape from the impact of all kinds of different exploitation. And your work would have a tangible impact on the future generations of Michiganders and others who look to drink safe water with confidence and swim on clear shores and take deep breaths of open air and continue to enjoy our Great Lakes year round. I'm so proud of the work that my NRA division does. We do have some amazing attorneys who work there who are just so dedicated to these issues, but we need more. This is an uphill fight. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, this is an area of such importance. I mean, as all of you know who are on here, and you wouldn't be on here if this wasn't important to you. I mean, we are facing, a catastrophe, not just in Michigan, but globally. And we need dedicated public servants. We need lawyers who care about environmental justice, to work in an office that cares deeply about environmental justice. And I will say this one last thing, because I know I've taken up a lot of time. I have spent almost all my career in public service in one way or the other. And I have so many people that I went to law school with that I swear, like, they just took the best jobs they could get that paid the most money. And after 10 years, they were burnt out and they don't want to be lawyers anymore. And frankly, many of them are not. But I have absolutely loved my career. I've been a lawyer for nearly 30 years, licensed in this state, and I have loved almost every minute of it. And the reason for that is because I'm doing something where I feel like I'm actually making a difference, and I'm doing work that I love. And that's what you should want for your careers too. I know that there's always the, I think there's always the notion that, like, listen, I got to go out and just get whoever's going to pay me the most money. I got student loans to pay off, and that has to be my priority. But, you know, if you do that, you're not going to be happy. You're not going to love the work that you do. You're not going to be excited to wake up in the morning and start doing research or working on a brief or argue a case. And like a lot of people I know, you might end up kind of miserable and not wanting to practice law at all. So that's a little bit of my selling pitch. Come to the Department of Attorney General in Michigan, because we sure would love to have you, and you'd be doing such exciting and interesting work. And scene.
Thank you so much, AG Nessel. That was inspiring and, you know, a call to action. And I love how much of a straight shooter you are. You just say it like it is. And that's so refreshing for all of us. I wanted to offer the chance for a student to ask a question, but I can also give you one that we received in advance. If there isn't a student out there, let's see. Okay, Q&A. Okay, this is a good question. So AG, is there a field of law outside of environmental that would improve the chances of joining this team that you would recommend? You know, I gather this is a field to pursue, a field to study, etc.
Well, first of all, at the Department of Attorney General, we got it all. We have like 27 divisions in our office. So no matter what kind of law you're interested in, I guarantee there's a place for you in our department. And so hopefully, again, you know, I'm here to try to inspire people to become environmental attorneys, because there's just such a crucial need for it. But we have all kinds of different needs. So, I mean, whatever your love of, whatever the discipline is that you're most interested in, I guarantee there's a place for you in our office. I will say this, we also need litigators. Like, if you want to go to court and try cases, you need to come to my office. We really need people that are fierce advocates and who understand the litigation process and aren't afraid to mix it up a little bit in court. But we have all kinds of lawyers that work in our office. So I would just say this, if you're looking to make a difference, and I will say, again, I know that government jobs can't always compete with the private sector. But the thing that's great about my department is, for public service jobs, ours are actually on the higher paying scale. So, you know, depending on what your student loans are, I mean, you're not gonna, it's not like you won't be able to have a roof over your head or, you know, be able to feed yourself. You know, and we have every kind of legal work that you could imagine takes place in our department. So I can't just say, well, if you like this, if you like criminal law, if you like, you know, tax law, if you like, you know, consumer protection work, I mean, all of those things, and 100 other types of law as well. We do it all. And I would say that whatever anybody would interject and say, what about this? What about that? My answer would be yes, that too, because we practice everything in our office. And the other thing, I know, I'm sorry, this is part of the question. I'm just going to throw it in anyway. I just want to say this. If this is the kind of thing that you are mulling over, here's what I would encourage you to do. Look at the front page of whatever media publication you look at, maybe not like TMZ or something, but whether it's, you know, the Detroit Free Press or the Detroit News or MLive, whether it's a national publication, if it's, you know, the Washington Post or the New York Times, I guarantee if you look at the front page of the paper, there will be, you know, half of the articles you're going to read about in some way, shape, or form involve our department, if it's a state paper, or some AG's department that is doing something very important and very novel, because we, you know, we represent the entire state. And we have so many exciting cases that are going on that there's no way that you could come to the office and be working on cases that aren't high profile, really important and impactful cases, because most of the important impactful cases in the state are being handled by the department.
That was great, actually, because you helped answer one of the other questions. So thank you for that. AG Nessel, it was so nice to hear from you and such a great way to get this started. I'm hoping that this is part of a series that we can encourage all the students that we interact with to work in government, work at AG offices. And it was so exciting to hear from you. I'm going to turn it over to Jessica now to talk to the panel. But if there's any last words you want to share, AG Nessel, that'd be great.
Well, I don't know. So who do we, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to monopolize this because you have a whole panel here, but I just want everybody to know, I mean, we take interns, we have clerkships. If it's something that you think you might want to try out and you're not sure, come on and apply to work in our office and see the kind of stuff that we do. And, if you think it's for you, that's a great way to make sure that you get hired. And that you come in as soon as you pass the bar as an assistant AG. And if not, it always looks good on a resume. So, and again, we have a million different divisions. So anything you're interested in, we really are looking for good lawyers. So please, look at our clerkship program and think about coming over to the department. Do I sound desperate? I feel like I sound desperate a little bit. But I just, it's really important to me that we get people who are interested in making a difference. And that's what you get to do at our office. And now I'm done. Gonna let you guys go on with your day, but come to the Department of Attorney General in Michigan. Okay, all
Thank
done.
So
Thanks,
much.
guys. All right, bye.
Jessica.
Well, thank you so much, AG Nessel, for your words. Really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for watching. So I'm Jessica Bell, I'm Deputy Director of the State Energy and Environmental Impact Center. I know there are some questions in the Q&A that aren't answered, so we may be able to get to some of them later on in the program, but I do want to get to our panelists. So I'm very excited to have 4 great panelists today to talk to you about their career paths and their responsibilities in AG offices. So I'll introduce each panelist briefly and then turn it over to them, but you can find full bios in the link that we have just put in the chat. So first we have Polly Sink, who is an Assistant Attorney General working for Michigan AG Dana Nessel. She serves as the first assistant in the Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture Division. She holds an undergraduate degree and a law degree from the University of Michigan. We have Andrew Armstrong, who is the Chief of the Springfield Environmental Bureau of the Illinois Attorney General's Office. He's a graduate of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and the Northwestern University School of Law. Gavin McCabe is an Assistant Attorney General in the Environmental Protection Bureau of the New York State Attorney General's Office. He's a graduate of Yale University and the Georgetown University Law Center. We're also joined today by Liza Robertson Young, who is Public Interest Counsel for Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul. She is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin and its law school. So before I turn it over to our panelists, just remind everyone to drop your questions into the Q&A as you think of them. And now I'll turn it over to Polly. Thanks.
Thank you. Excuse me. I am really pleased to be here, and AG Nessel gave you a great introduction of the work that we do and how fulfilling it is. And like the Attorney General, I went to the University of Michigan and stayed there for law school. Came back actually after going to work on the Hill for several years. Did not know what I wanted to do, was not sure what to do with my political science background, and started working on energy and environmental issues. And that brought me back thinking this would be something I wanted to work on, continuing to work for the public. I came in after attending a job talk, much like this one, met my future boss there, in my sweatshirt and shorts, and ended up interviewing and doing a summer externship. And that led to eventually landing back on the public sector side. For those of you who think, is this an all or nothing kind of proposition? I would say, I did a few years in the private sector. There are sometimes hiring freezes. We're not in that situation right now. And watch and wait, or get your foot in the door working in another division, which I think one of the questions was aimed at. Yes, it is easier to get some involvement and get in the door, maybe doing transportation work or doing consumer protection work. And we'd have a lot of crossover among our divisions here. In our environmental division, I knew I would be doing clean air enforcement, clean water enforcement maybe, and that would be fulfilling on its own. What I didn't expect, but has been a wonderful and continuing surprise, I've been there for a long time now, is that it's thought-provoking, it's interesting. I learn new things all the time. Who owns the treasure in a sunken ship on the bottom of the Great Lakes? How do we deal with restoring an old channelized concrete covered channel of a river in an urban area and bring it back to life? How do we cost out what a company who did that to that river should pay in damages? And how do we work with the communities that are affected to say, this is our plan. What do you think? What do you need in your community to try to make you whole again? And that goes into the large category of natural resource damages, which allows us to work with the federal government, with our Native American communities, and with the local communities who are affected in our state. And that goes to sort of the big picture that our work is, yes, we're in court, we're negotiating with polluters, we're negotiating with a municipality who by some bad circumstances had a storm sewer overflow. They need to make it right. So sometimes we're not working against, but we're working with the people who need to fix the problems that they made. So being in court is part of it. Negotiating has been a really fulfilling part of what I have worked on, whether it's a small case to make sure that a leaking gas station makes it right, or is it going to be, your Dow Chemicals of the world who have to do a lot of work to make up for the past practices that were not friendly to the environment. Another thing is that I sadly do not have, I wish I had some of the science background that would have made my job maybe a little bit easier, but thankfully we have fantastic, our clients are the agencies in the state. So our resources, our environmental agencies, agriculture agencies, their chemists, their geologists, their toxicologists, their biologists are a fantastic resource. And they do teach me and teach us how to do our jobs. How do we get that testimony to get the evidence in to make our case? And even more fun, how do we use the science that they know to tear down the other side's experts? And that is really a great part of what we do. And I know I'm going on long too. I will finish by saying that, echoing what Attorney General Nessel said, when you get a win working in any law setting, it's a win, it feels good. When we get a win here for the public, we are building that foundation that the communities, that the resources in our state, that our Great Lakes can rely on to preserve our resources and protect our environment in the future. And that is really the kind of win that just winning for, corporate client G or X doesn't really bring. And I would encourage you to look at public service to start off with, or don't dismiss it. You can come into public service even after doing a little bit of work in the private sector, but don't get stuck there. We want you, and we're not living in poverty. This is a job where I'm going to put 3 kids through college and it will be fine. So I really thank you for the opportunity to talk. I look forward to your questions. I'll turn it over to the other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the sponsors of this program and to the presenters, and especially to the law students who are listening in on this, because we need you guys. I'm Andrew Armstrong. I'm the chief of the Springfield Environmental Bureau for the Illinois Attorney General's office. We desperately need the next generation of public interest government leaders in environmental and energy work right now. We're at a really important time in Michigan, in Illinois, across the Midwest, where our whole energy system is changing for the better, less polluting. But we also face big challenges, and we really need smart young attorneys to come on and be, the next leaders in our offices. So thank you so much for your attendance here today to hear about what we do. So in terms of my background, I kind of got the environmental law bug when I was in law school. And I worked as a research assistant for a professor at law school, studying the public trust doctrine, which is about who actually does own, for example, goods that are held in trust for the public, like the Great Lakes and other navigable waters. And really what hooked me was that it's a relatively new area of law compared to a lot of common law, but it underpins just about everything we do, our economy, our government, and even more today, even our existence is underpinned by how we decide that people should have access to common goods like clean air, clean water, safe places to live. And it's being developed even today. We constantly face new legal issues. So from the stake of the stakes, from the intellectual value of the work, I can't recommend environmental law enough as a field to practice in. And in terms of my background, I was hooked on environmental law. I externed for the United States EPA in Chicago when I was in law school. But when I got to law school, I had a pretty tough time finding a public interest environmental law job. I actually started off working for a law firm in Chicago doing commercial litigation. And I was able to move to the Attorney General's office in Chicago. And I can't tell you, like Attorney General Nessel said, the value of working for the public is something that cannot be overstated. Having been on the side of private practice, I didn't find my work to be necessarily bad, but at the same time, just the value I get from going into the office, or at this point working from home on behalf of the people of my state to get them a better environment. It's just it's a form of compensation that you can't really put a dollar figure on. So I've enjoyed that thoroughly. I've also had, after working for the Attorney General's office in Chicago, I joined a not-for-profit group, the Environmental Law and Policy Center in Chicago, that works across from Midwest, and definitely had a great experience there. Very proud of the work I did there. But working for government has its own advantages in that regard too. One of the really great things about government work is that when you go into court, you are speaking on behalf of the people of your state or of your country. You have the full weight of your attorney general behind you, and that can help you do great things. One of the things I'm really particularly excited about over the past year, when I was in law school, one of the things I was studying and learning about, don't want to date myself too much, but back in the 2000s was this idea of environmental justice, and how overburdened communities that had been discriminated against due to race and economic status were getting a really bad deal when it came to the environment, and we're bearing an unfair share of pollution. And one of the exciting things over the past year is that we've been able to work on an environmental justice initiative at the Illinois Attorney General's office to speak out about these issues and try to take action and put new policies in place to better protect all of the people of our state. So that's something that we were able to do because we had the backing of a strong attorney general who really cared about these issues, like Attorney General Nessel does. So I can't tell you enough, recommend enough. Please do consider a career in public interest environmental law, and more particularly for the government. Our office in Illinois, we have over 450 attorneys working both in Chicago, in Springfield, and also satellite offices across the state. We do it all: consumer fraud, antitrust, criminal work, and we have over 25 attorneys working on environmental issues alone. So if you're interested, please take a look at us. We hire externs in fall, spring, and summer. And we also do work with law schools on fellowships for recent graduates. Please talk to your school about that. And please check out our website, www.ilag.gov. Thank you.
Um, Good morning or afternoon, wherever you are, everyone. Gavin McCabe in New York. And I also want to say thanks to the organizers and to all of you for attending. I work in the New York State Attorney General's office. I've been here for about 3.5 to 4 years. And before that, I worked in the California Attorney General's office for about 18. So I've been at this for a while, and I would echo many of the things that others said about the edification one gets out of working in such an office and in the public interest. I started out, and many of you may, I heard the reference to the lure of the law firm and the money. I went to law school not knowing exactly what I wanted to do, and went into a big law firm in part because I was nearly broke at the end of law school, and I moved to California from the East Coast, and they paid for my bar exam, and they paid for my bar review class, and all that was great. And honestly, there's some good experience to be had working in a large law firm, and now finding myself on the other side of cases against such firms, it demystifies things a little bit and helps you to know how the other side works in some respects. But with that said, I was there for a bit, and like others have said, I found that I was just in their litigation department doing kind of whatever came along, and fighting about a breach of contract, and businesses seeking money from one another. You get invested in defending your client or representing them. But I got to do some work on some pro bono matters on behalf of some environmental NGOs, and it really turned me on. And I realized, that one thing I hadn't thought of, and maybe other, you're a self-selecting group who are interested in environmental law or energy law. You can merge your personal interests with your work life, and it can be very fulfilling. So I got a job first at the EPA regional office in San Francisco. They were staffing up to do a lot of work on Superfund cases. At the time, California had a huge amount of Superfund sites, still does. And so I kind of dove into that. And then through that work, we overlap states, sometimes work with the federal government, sometimes against the federal government. I ended up teamed up with the AG's office, the California AG's office on some Superfund matters, and kind of got recruited over to go there from someone I worked with. And it was great. And I got exposure to a lot of different areas of environmental law through doing that. At least how that office works. We were all generalists, and we also did, we did enforcement work, but we also did defensive work. There's a lot of important policy issues that states address through regulation, environmental regulation. I think that litigation is almost like the tail end of the regulatory process, because so many things get sued on, and I got to work with state agencies in their development of regulatory programs. So, for example, in California, I helped them defend a lot of their efforts to address climate change, and that's very of great interest to me, and was very fulfilling work. And so a few things that I guess I would pull out of that as tips or things to think about. You're going to spend a lot of your daily life in a job, in a workplace, maybe more so than you do at home. And you should really care about what you do. If you're doing it just for a paycheck, a lot of people do that, and you can get by in life. But I think if you're spending those long hours and really investing yourself, it's really great to have it be something you care about on such a personal level. You may not always agree with your client actions, but for the most part, in the 2 states I've worked in, they're very progressive, and I feel lucky to be able to do that work. Also, comparing it to law firm life, there is a work-life balance. I have kids. I was able to, leave at 3 o'clock and coach my son's baseball team for several years. maybe go back and do a little work at night. But, law firm life was a lot less flexible in that way. I have friends who, hear what I do. I have lawyer friends, when, not to be too political, but when, the prior administration was elected and started doing a lot of rollbacks, my state stepped up to challenge a lot. And I had friends gnashing their teeth about this administration doing this or that. I was getting to work on it and pour kind of my angst into fighting against some of that stuff. And I felt like, hey, I'm getting paid to do this. That's a bonus. As Attorney General Nessel said, you just look at the newspaper and you see the public issues going on in the state where you live. And being in an AG's office gives you an opportunity to have a hand in that. I find it fulfilling. And I, as others have said, I think a great thing to do is do an internship during the summer, during a school year as an extern. It's a great way to get a feeling for what really goes on there. And I guess a final thing I would say, when I went to the AG's office, I had been second chair on things, or, when I worked at EPA, I was sort of working with a US DOJ attorney on litigation, and you just get handed the file and you do it. You get experience fast. You're taking the depositions, you're finding the expert witnesses and retaining them. You're doing all that work, and it's a little scary at times and challenging, but I found it to be, for me anyway, dive into the deep end, and it was a great way to gain experience. So I'll stop there, and I think Liza is next, so I will thank you, and hope to see you all in the future.
Hi, thanks so much for introducing me. I echo all the other panelists. Thanks to the State Impact Center for hosting this great event, and to all of you for joining us today. My name is Liza Robertson-Young. I'm Public Interest Counsel for Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul. My role is a little bit different than the others on this panel in that I work on issues affecting the public interest more broadly, rather than having the environmental expertise that my colleagues here do. I ended up working for the AG through a somewhat circuitous route. I was an English major in college. I wasn't totally sure what I wanted my career path to be when I graduated from law school. I started out right after law school doing a staff clerkship at the Seventh Circuit, which, as a brief aside, the staff clerkship program is pretty incredible and not a lot of people know about it. So if you're interested in clerking, I really recommend you check it out. I think it's particularly great if you have a public interest focus. The staff clerks work principally on unargued or short argument cases, which tend to be cases involving pro se litigants and issues affecting the public interest rather than big corporate cases. So you might handle immigration or employment discrimination or direct criminal appeals or habeas cases. So if you're interested in clerking, I recommend you check it out. After clerking, I worked as an associate at a big firm in Chicago for a while, like some of my other colleagues here. After a few years, it was pretty clear to me that that wasn't going to be the right place for me long term. I left the firm to work on the Obama campaign in 2012, and then eventually ended up working for the Illinois Senate, where I did a few different things. I was chief counsel for the Senate Judiciary Committee and the Labor Committee, as well as the Senate Task Force on Sexual Harassment during the height of the Me Too movement, and worked on bills including Illinois' automatic voter registration law, Illinois' ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, and legislation intended to limit state participation in federal immigration enforcement. In 2018, one of the senators I'd worked closely with in his capacity as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Kwame Raoul, was elected AG, and he asked me to follow him over to the AG's office. During his campaign, he had talked a lot about how state AGs were really the last bulwark against extreme federal overreach, whether it's in the environmental context, immigration, civil rights, protection of workers. And so AG-elect Raul created a new position for me coordinating the office's federal advocacy, what we often call multi-state actions, because it involves a coalition of AGs from multiple states working collectively to leverage their impact. Since I've joined the office, we've worked on a wide range of multi-state actions with our fellow AGs in other states, including both New York and Michigan. We have filed suit to block construction of the border wall based in part on its environmental impact. We've sued the United States Postal Service for slowing down mail delivery in the run-up to the 2020 election. We've defended the Affordable Care Act and lots more. Institutionally, my role is housed in our public interest division, and the structure of AG offices can vary a lot and can be kind of confusing to navigate from the outside, I think. But for anybody interested in the Illinois AG's office, the public interest division, together with the environmental and consumer divisions, do the majority of the office's affirmative litigation, meaning that we're acting more like an impact litigation firm as opposed to the work the other parts of the office do to defend the state. The public interest division includes a lot of exciting places to do public interest work, including our Civil Rights Bureau, which enforces laws prohibiting discrimination in housing, public accommodations, employment, financial matters. It also leads the work that our office does to enforce a consent decree that we negotiated with the Chicago Police Department to ensure oversight of reforms to eliminate patterns of unconstitutional policing. The Public Interest Division also has our Disability Rights Bureau, workplace rights, antitrust, and our Special Litigation Bureau, which handles complex litigation and works to uncover fraud in government services and unethical conduct by government officials and employees. They also staff a lot of interesting stuff that comes up in the multi-state context, like reproductive rights and election and voting issues. So I think you should check out all of those bureaus if you're interested in public interest work. My day-to-day responsibilities vary a lot. One of the things that I work on is building opportunities for us to lead multi-state coalitions. Just as a small sampling, over the past couple of years, we've filed a lawsuit challenging federal rule that would reduce the wages of tipped workers. We co-led with New York an amicus brief in a Supreme Court case presenting the question of whether Title VII bars employers from discriminating against their employees on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. We led a letter to Congress last year advocating for passage of federal criminal justice reform. So we have a lot of different subject areas that we touch on. And I think as others have said, you pick up the page of a newspaper and you will see work that state AGs are doing. One of the main things I've been working on lately is sort of a continuation from my job at the Senate. We are part of a multi-state coalition that has sued the federal government asking that it recognize the Equal Rights Amendment as part of the federal constitution, now that it has been ratified by 38 states, including Illinois' ratification in 2018. We recently filed our opening brief on appeal in the DC Circuit in that case, and we're lucky to be supported by 12 amicus briefs, including from our friends in the New York and Michigan AG offices. I think one great thing about my job is that multi-state work touches virtually every part of our office. So I get to work on a wide variety of issues with a wide range of really knowledgeable subject matter experts like Andrew, who spoke to you earlier. In addition to federal advocacy, I still work on some state legislative matters, including developing an annual legislative agenda for the Public Interest Division and participating in negotiations with state lawmakers on bills that affect the public interest. One of our big successes last year was passing a state law that gave our office statutory authority to investigate patterns and practices of unconstitutional policing. So I think I'm probably getting close to using up my time. Working for the AG's offices, I think one of the most rewarding ways to serve the public interest. I feel incredibly fortunate to do the work I do. I love my job. I love my colleagues. I think not a lot of lawyers can say that. So I encourage you to come work for us. We are currently hiring summer law clerks. I can drop a link in the chat to our careers website, which has law clerk hiring information, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Great. Well, thank you so much to Liza, Gavin, Andrew, and Polly for your time and your insights. It's just been really inspiring. I know we have some questions in the chat or in the Q&A, sorry. I'll go through some of them, maybe try to combine and get the highlights, but please do continue putting questions in the Q&A as you have them. So one question is, what skills can attorneys or law students cultivate that would allow them to perform well at your office? Maybe there's coursework that you would particularly recommend, or other experiences. So who would like to sort of take a first turn with that one?
I would highly recommend externships like Gavin recommended. You can't really overstate how important it is to be able to go in and work someplace that you like to work, to see what they do and what they need from their attorneys. So I think that's a great tack to take in law school.
Yeah, if you're looking at what coursework to take, obviously there are environmental law classes, substantive environmental law classes, you can learn a lot. I think administrative law is key, and things like federal courts and federal court jurisdiction. So many of the issues we deal with, in challenges, someone have standing, is there, exhaustion of issues. A lot of that goes into is not really what you might think of as environmental law, but how government works and what rules are followed. It's really good to know that stuff. I wish I had worked harder in my administrative law class in law school. It's very, very valuable.
I echo those are both great suggestions. And I think in terms of skills, adding on to the legal side of it, building on the practical, working on that statutory interpretation and being ready to write up something and deliver it either verbally or in writing quickly, and trying to make sure that you are, ready to ask questions about an assignment. What form do you want it in? When's the deadline? Because sometimes that is misunderstanding and you don't want that to trip you up in your workplace or in your externship. So getting clarity and being ready to turn that work around and kind of put an end to at least the first part of your assignment.
I would just add one other thing, not necessarily about what to take in law school, but I ran our summer program for many years in California, and I found students who came in interviews who were well aware of the work we did, had taken the time to read up on some of the cases we work on, or some of the things maybe that state agencies were doing that would be the subject of litigation. I think showing that level of interest, having that level of interest is important for someone looking to hire a student. So I would recommend that.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I remember from my law school days sort of trying to focus on the public law courses. We were fortunate to have a state AG class actually, so that was sort of really eye-opening for me. And we did have a question about getting contact info. So our speakers are putting info in the chat, and we'll be sending out an email thanking everyone for attending. That will have some of these links and resources collected if you haven't managed to grab them all. Let's see, another question. I know that most of you really have touched on comparing your experience at the AG office to other jobs you've had. I guess for folks who are really know that they're interested in going to the public interest side, do you have any advice on how to think through working for an NGO or another governmental agency, whether it's federal or municipal versus the state AG office, and what sort of considerations to look at when you're making that decision?
Well, I worked for an NGO kind of after and before I worked for the state AG's office. And the one experience that kind of sums up the difference for me is I remember working on some comments on behalf of 5 environmental groups that were going to be filing, and I finished them off at like 4:25 p.m. one day and then filed them at 4:30. And that doesn't happen in the state world. There's a lot more layers of bureaucracy to go through. I mean, that's a good and a bad thing, because my simplistic answer would be you might have a bit more autonomy and ability to press kind of the edge of arguments at a not-for-profit. But when you work for a state government, you have that the credibility and the gravitas that comes with working for an elected official or appointed official by a governor, and it gives you a lot more authority, and people, I think, have to listen to that. So I had fun and felt fulfilled at both jobs, but working for the state government gives you, some real power to get things done, which I really appreciate.
I'll just add to that. We often team up with some of our environmental organizations on an amicus brief here or there, consult with them, meet with them frequently. But spot on answer, because where my client has a statute, the permit conditions are met, they have to issue that permit or maybe face a lawsuit. And an NGO might be able and have more freedom to argue for policy changes, for to pushing the envelope, as Andrew said. And so there are times where our positions can be a little bit different, but our working relationship is good with our environmental organizations. We strive to keep them that way. But it is nice to go into court and stand up and say here on behalf of the Department of Attorney General for the state of Michigan. And that is a position that we all take very seriously.
Yeah, I would echo what Polly and Andrew said. We also work closely with NGOs. We've hired a few people from the ACLU recently. There's some back and forth between people working in NGOs and going to the AG's office. We frequently partner with them on litigation, whether it's a suit we've brought where they're acting as amici or a suit they've brought where we're acting as an amicus. But I do think it is nice to have the power and the weight of the state behind you. And that's something that you don't get when you're at an NGO.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think when you think about how you want to be involved in environmental issues or other public interest issues, client agencies, they're more the policymaker, and that may be what you're interested in. So I think there's a big divide between being a litigator and being maybe a person who works at an agency developing the matter that is the subject of the litigation. And some people are more comfortable in the role of maybe being the policymaker, and some people are more comfortable in the other role. Which is not to say AGs are not at all involved in policymaking, because they can be and are. But in the environmental arena, typically clients are the ones who are doing these things. So that's something to keep in mind. What some people don't want to do the litigation, and some people really do. So that's something to think about.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. I see we're just about out of time, although I know we could talk about this and listen to your advice and insights for a while. So thank you to Liza, Gavin, Polly, and Andrew for joining us, and a big thanks to AG Nessel for kicking us off. And really thanks to everyone for attending. It's been so great to have this conversation, and we look forward to having you all going out and doing really important work in this great work with great colleagues. So we'll be sending a follow-up email to anyone who's registered with a recording and some other info. We're also dropping some links into the chat. So we hope that you'll stay in touch with the State Impact Center through our newsletter and student listserv, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on future events. Thanks so much for joining us today. Bye, everyone.